The gentle hum of silence. That's what most people fear the most, the moment when the house is empty, when the phone stays quiet, when there's no one to share the little victories and defeats of everyday life. I've spent decades exploring the human spirit, and if there's one question that keeps surfacing in the depths of people's hearts, it's that, am I meant to be alone? Let those words sink in for a moment. They carry so much weight, don't they? So much fear, so much uncertainty, and yes, so much possibility. You see, we live in a world that's never been more connected, yet never more isolated. Our phones buzz with notifications, our social media feeds overflow with updates, but somehow that deep yearning for genuine connection remains unfulfilled. And in the quiet moments, when we're truly honest with ourselves, we wonder if there's something wrong with us, if we're somehow broken or unworthy of deep, meaningful relationships. I'm here today to challenge everything you believe about being alone. Everything society has taught you about relationships, about worthiness, about what it means to live a fulfilled life. Because the truth, the beautiful, liberating truth is that understanding your relationship with solitude is the key to understanding your relationship with everything else in life. Think back to your childhood for a moment. Remember how naturally you played alone, how you could spend hours in your own world creating, imagining, being completely present in the moment? There was no judgment then, no anxiety about being seen alone, no questioning whether something was wrong with you. You were simply being. What changed? When did we start believing that being alone meant being lonely? When did solitude become something to fear rather than something to... The answer lies in the stories we've been told. Stories that say we're incomplete without another person. Stories that equate success with partnership, that measure our worth by our relationship status. These stories have become so deeply embedded in our consciousness that we've forgotten to question them. But here's what I've discovered after years of studying human behavior and consciousness. The people who are most at peace with being alone are often the ones who form the deepest, most meaningful connections with others. It seems paradoxical, doesn't it? But this paradox holds one of life's most profound truths. You see, true connection with ourselves and with others doesn't come from fear. It doesn't come from neediness or desperation. It comes from a place of wholeness, of self-understanding, of deep inner peace. Let me share something powerful with you. In my work with thousands of people across the globe, I've noticed a pattern. Those who chase relationships out of fear of being alone invariably find themselves feeling lonely even when they're with someone. While those who learn to embrace solitude, who develop a rich inner life, who become their own best friend, they're the ones who naturally attract deep, meaningful relationships into their lives. This isn't about choosing to be alone forever. It's not about rejecting relationships or building walls around your heart. It's about understanding a fundamental truth. Your relationship with yourself is the foundation upon which all other relationships, when you're afraid of being alone, you send out an energy of need, of lack, of incompleteness. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, responds by giving you experiences that mirror that energy, relationships that feel empty, connections that leave you wanting more, partnerships that reinforce your fears rather than dissolve them. But when you learn to be at peace with solitude, when you discover the joy of your own company, something magical happens. You begin to attract people and experiences that match your frequency of self-love and inner peace. The relationships you form come from a place of choice rather than necessity, of want rather than need, of love rather than fear. Think about water for a moment. When you desperately try to hold on to it, it slips through your fingers. But when you relax your grip, create a stable vessel with your hands, it stays naturally. Relationships work the same way. The tighter we hold on out of fear of being alone, the more they tend to slip away. But when we create a stable foundation within ourselves, when we become a vessel of love and self-acceptance, relationships flow naturally into our lives. This journey of self-discovery isn't always easy. There will be moments when the silence feels deafening, when the emptiness seems overwhelming. But these are precisely the moments that hold the greatest potential for transformation. These are the moments when we can choose to either run from our solitude or lean into it, explore it, allow it to teach us what we need to learn. Every great spiritual teacher, every profound philosopher, every transformative artist in history has had to grapple with solitude. They've had to face the depths of their own being, to sit with their thoughts, their fears, their dreams, and from that place of deep self-communion, they brought forth their greatest gifts to the world. You might be thinking, but I'm not a spiritual teacher or a philosopher. I just want to feel less alone. And that's exactly why this message is so important for you. Because understanding your relationship with solitude isn't just about being comfortable being alone. It's about discovering who you truly are beneath all the roles you play, all the masks you wear, all the expectations you try to meet. It's about recognizing that you are complete, whole, and worthy exactly as you are. That being alone doesn't mean being lonely. That solitude can be a sacred space where you reconnect with your own wisdom, your own inner guidance, your own truth. This understanding changes everything. It changes how you approach relationships, how you show up in the world, how you make decisions about your life. When you're no longer acting from a place of fear, fear of being alone, fear of being unloved, fear of being left behind, you begin to make choices that align with your true nature, your authentic self. Then that beautiful irony, and the moment you truly accept that you might be meant to be alone, not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's something deeply right about taking this journey of self-discovery, is often the moment when the deepest connections begin to form in your life. It's like learning to dance with life itself. When you're afraid of being alone, you cling to your dance partner, stepping on toes, missing the rhythm, too focused on not being left alone to enjoy the dance. But when you learn to dance with yourself first, when you find your own rhythm, your own flow, that's when the real magic happens. That's when you can truly dance with another, creating something beautiful together while maintaining your own balance, your own center, your own joy. Let me share something profound with you. Every time I drive through a city at night, I see countless windows lit up in apartment buildings. Behind each of those windows is a story, someone eating dinner alone, reading a book, contemplating their life choices, perhaps feeling that same ache of loneliness we've all experienced. But what if we could help each of those people understand that being alone isn't a punishment, but rather an invitation to the most important relationship they'll ever have? You see, society has conditioned us to believe that being alone is something we need to fix, something we need to overcome. We're bombarded with messages about finding the one, about how life doesn't truly begin until we find our perfect match. These messages are so pervasive that they become part of our internal dialogue, creating a constant undercurrent of anxiety about our relationship status. The quality of your life isn't determined by whether you're in a relationship or not. It's determined by the relationship you have with yourself. This isn't just positive thinking or feel-good philosophy. It's a fundamental truth about human nature. When you truly understand this, everything shifts. The desperate need to fill every moment with noise, with activity, with other people's presence begins to fade. You start to recognize that the discomfort you feel when alone isn't because being alone is inherently painful. It's because you haven't yet learned to be good company for yourself. How often do you actually listen to your own thoughts? Not the surface chatter, not the constant stream of worries and to-do lists, but your deeper thoughts, the ones that emerge in moments of quiet reflection. These thoughts are like shy animals. They only come out when the environment feels safe, when there's enough silence and solitude for them to make themselves known. This is where the real work begins. Instead of running from solitude, learn to create a welcoming space for it in your life. Start small. Spend 15 minutes each day in complete silence. No phone, no TV, no distractions. Just you and your thoughts. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, even unbearable. Your mind might race with all the things you should be doing, all the people you could be talking to, all the ways you're wasting time by just sitting there. But stick with it, because in those moments of discomfort, something remarkable starts to happen. You begin to hear your own voice, not the voice of your parents, your friends, society, or your fears, but your authentic voice, the one that knows what you truly want, what brings you joy, what gives your life meaning. This is the voice that gets drowned out when we're constantly surrounded by noise and other people's opinions. It's the voice that holds the answers to our deepest questions, including whether we're truly meant to be alone or not. As you develop this relationship with yourself, you'll notice that your fear of being alone starts to dissolve. Not because you've given up on connections with others, but because you've discovered that you're pretty good company. You'll find yourself making choices from a place of self-knowledge rather than fear. You'll start to notice the difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is a chosen state, a peaceful communion with yourself. Loneliness is the painful awareness of feeling disconnected. And surprisingly, you can feel intensely lonely even in a room full of people or in a relationship. This understanding changes how you approach relationships entirely. Instead of seeking someone to complete you, you'll seek someone to share your completeness with. Instead of looking for someone to fill your emptiness, you'll look for someone who resonates with your fullness. The truth is, some of us might be meant to spend more time alone than others. Some of us might be meant to have different kinds of relationships than what society considers normal. And that's perfectly okay. Your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Consider the great redwood trees. They stand alone, reaching hundreds of feet into the sky. But beneath the surface, their roots intertwine with those of other trees, creating a complex network of support and communication. This is a beautiful metaphor for healthy independence. Standing strong on your own while remaining connected to a larger community. You might be wondering, but what about love? What about partnership? What about family? These are beautiful aspects of life, and nothing I'm saying diminishes their value. But here's the crucial distinction. These things should be choices we make from a place of wholeness, not obligations we fulfill from a place of fear. When you're at peace with being alone, you develop a remarkable clarity about relationships. You can see them for what they truly are, not what you need them to be. You can love without clutching, care without controlling, connect without compromising your essence. This is what I mean when I talk about being meant to be alone. It's not about isolation or rejection of relationships. It's about developing such a strong, nurturing relationship with yourself that being alone becomes as comfortable as being with others. It's about reaching a place where your happiness, your sense of worth, your feeling of completeness doesn't depend on whether someone else is in the picture. From this place of self-containment, magical things begin to happen. The relationships you do form become richer, deeper, more authentic. Why? Because you're no longer trying to get something from them that you should be giving to yourself. You're no longer trying to use other people to fill your empty spaces or silence your fears. Instead, you're coming to relationships as a whole person, curious about what you can create together, excited about what you can share, but not desperate for validation or completion. This is the kind of energy that attracts meaningful connections, that builds lasting bonds, that creates relationships worth having. And if those relationships don't come, if you find yourself in periods of solitude, you'll be okay. More than okay. You'll be thriving, growing, exploring, creating, because you'll understand that being alone isn't a waiting room for real life to begin. It's not a punishment or a problem to be solved. It's an opportunity to deepen your relationship with yourself, to hear your own wisdom, to dance to your own rhythm. There's a story about a man who spent years searching for peace. He traveled the world, studied with masters, read countless books, tried every technique he could find, yet peace eluded him. One day, exhausted from his search, he sat alone in his room, and for the first time, he truly listened to the silence. In that moment, he discovered that the peace he had been searching for had been within him all along, waiting patiently for him to notice it. This story reflects a profound truth about our relationship with solitude. We spend so much energy trying to escape it, to fix it, to fill it with noise and activity, that we miss the gifts it offers. We're like someone standing in front of a locked door, desperately searching for a key, not realizing we're holding it in our hand. The key is self-acceptance, not the superficial kind that comes from positive affirmations or temporary bursts of confidence, but deep, authentic self-acceptance that comes from truly knowing and embracing who you are. Let's talk about something that few people discuss. The courage it takes to be alone. In a world that celebrates couples, that organizes itself around partnerships, that constantly reinforces the message that we need someone else to be complete, choosing to be alone. or accepting that it might be your path requires tremendous courage. This journey isn't about becoming some sort of lone wolf, disconnected from humanity. It's about developing the strength to stand in your truth, whatever that truth might be. It's about having the courage to listen to your own inner guidance, even when it leads you down a path different from the one society expects you to take. Think about the pressure we put on ourselves and others to follow a predetermined timeline for relationships. Graduate school, find a partner, get married, have children, as if life were a checklist to be completed rather than a journey to be experienced. How many people rush into relationships, stay in unfulfilling partnerships, or compromise their values simply because they're afraid of being alone? But what if we could shift this perspective entirely? What if, instead of seeing being alone as a problem to be solved, we could see it as an opportunity to be embraced? What if the times when we find ourselves alone are actually invitations to explore the deepest parts of ourselves? This exploration isn't always comfortable. When you spend time alone, you come face to face with your unresolved emotions, your buried fears, your hidden dreams. You can't distract yourself from your own thoughts by focusing on someone else's needs or problems. You have to sit with yourself, feel your feelings, confront your shadows. But here's the beautiful thing, as you learn to sit with these uncomfortable feelings, as you develop the capacity to be present with yourself in all your complexity, something remarkable happens. The discomfort begins to transform into curiosity. The fear begins to transform into self-compassion. The resistance begins to transform into acceptance. You start to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. Your creativity flourishes in ways it couldn't when you were constantly seeking external validation. Your intuition becomes stronger because you're finally quiet enough to hear it. Your sense of purpose becomes clearer because you're no longer trying to align it with someone else's This is what I mean when I say that being alone might be your path. Not because you're unlovable, not because you're difficult to be with, not because there's something wrong with you, but because this solitude is the container in which your true self can emerge and flourish. Consider how many great insights, inventions, and works of art have come from people who are willing to spend time alone with their thoughts. Consider how many spiritual traditions incorporate periods of solitude as essential elements of growth and transformation. This isn't coincidence. It's recognition of a fundamental truth about human development. When you're alone, you have the space to explore questions that get lost in the noise of constant connection. Questions like, what do I really want from life? What brings me joy, independent of anyone else's preferences? What would I do if I wasn't trying to please or accommodate others? What are my true values, not the ones I've inherited or adopted to fit in? These questions lead to discoveries that can transform your life. You might find that you're perfectly capable of enjoying dinner at a restaurant alone, of traveling solo, of spending holidays in solitude. Not because these things are better than sharing experiences with others, but because they're equally valid ways of experiencing life. You might discover that your fear of being alone has been driving you to make compromises that diminish your spirit. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How often have you ignored your intuition because you were afraid of ending up alone? How many of your choices have been influenced by this fear? As you develop a healthy relationship with solitude, these fear-based decisions begin to fall away. You start making choices from a place of self-trust rather than fear. You begin to recognize that being alone isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Living a life that's not true to who you are is far worse. This doesn't mean you'll never feel lonely. Loneliness is part of the human experience, and even people who are at peace with being alone feel it sometimes. But there's a difference between experiencing loneliness and being controlled by the... When you're at peace with being alone, loneliness becomes like any other emotion, something that passes through you rather than something that defines you. You learn to sit with it, to understand it, to let it teach you what it has to teach you without letting it drive your decisions. This is true freedom. The freedom to be yourself, to follow your path, to listen to your inner guidance without the constant pressure to conform to others' expectations or timelines. It's the freedom to choose relationships because they add value to your life, not because you're trying to escape from yourself. This freedom often leads to deeper, more authentic connections with others. when you're no longer approaching relationships from a place of need or fear. You can connect with people from a place of genuine interest and appreciation. You can love without attachment, care without dependency, share without losing yourself. Let's talk about something that might feel uncomfortable at first. The art of becoming your own best company. This isn't about learning to tolerate being alone. It's about learning to thrive in your own presence. It's about creating such a rich, fulfilling relationship with yourself that being alone becomes a choice rather than a circumstance you endure. Think about how you treat yourself when you're alone. Do you immediately reach for distractions, the TV remote, your phone, anything to fill the silence? Do you feel an urgency to make plans, to be somewhere, anywhere else? These reactions are telling you something important about your relationship with yourself. The truth is, most of us were never taught how to be alone. We were taught how to be productive, how to be social, how to take care of others, but rarely how to simply be with ourselves. This is why solitude can feel so foreign, so uncomfortable at first. But what if I told you that this discomfort is actually a doorway to the most profound relationship you'll ever have? Because that's exactly what it is. When you learn to sit with that discomfort, to move through it rather than around it, you begin to discover parts of yourself that have been waiting years to be acknowledged. You start to notice the subtle differences between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a hunger, a feeling of lack. Solitude is a feast, a feeling of abundance. The same circumstance, being alone, can be experienced as either, depending on your relationship with yourself. This is where the real transformation begins. Start treating time alone as sacred space rather than empty space. Create rituals that honor your solitude. Maybe it's a morning meditation practice, a solo walk in nature, or simply sitting with a cup of tea and your thoughts. The specific activity doesn't matter as much as the intention behind it. When you're alone, practice being fully present with yourself. Notice the thoughts that arise without judging them. Pay attention to your feelings without trying to change them. Listen to your body's wisdom without dismissing it. This kind of self-attention is different from self-absorption. It's about developing a loving, curious relationship with all aspects of your being. You might discover that you have a rich inner world that you've never fully explored. You might find that you're actually quite good company when you give yourself the chance. You might realize that the connection you've been seeking outside yourself has been within you all along. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself or reject opportunities for connection with others. Rather, it means developing such a strong foundation within yourself that you can choose relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need. Every great relationship you'll ever have is built on the foundation of your relationship with yourself. If you don't know how to be alone with yourself, how can you truly be present with another? If you don't know how to listen to your own heart, how can you hear someone else's? If you don't know how to love yourself in solitude, how can you love someone else in partnership? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're practical guideposts for creating a life of authentic connection, whether that includes a romantic partnership or not. Because here's another truth that rarely gets spoken. Some of the loneliest people are in relationships. Being with someone doesn't automatically cure loneliness. In fact, it can amplify it if we haven't learned to be at peace with ourselves. This is why learning to be alone is so crucial, regardless of your relationship status. It's about developing the inner resources to navigate life's ups and downs. It's about building a sense of self that's stable enough to weather any storm, flexible enough to grow through any challenge. When you reach this place of self-containment, something magical happens. The world opens up in ways you never imagined. You start to see opportunities rather than obligations. You begin to make choices based on what truly resonates with your soul rather than what might keep you from being alone. Your creativity flourishes because you're no longer afraid of what others might think. Your intuition strengthens because you're finally quiet enough to hear it. Your sense of purpose clarifies because you're not trying to align it with someone else's expectation. This is true empowerment, not the kind that comes from external achievements or relationships, but the kind that wells up from within when you finally recognize your own completeness. It's the power to say yes when you mean yes, no when you mean no, And maybe when you need time to listen to your inner guidance, think about how many decisions in your life have been influenced by the fear of being alone. How many compromises have you made? How many dreams have you deferred? How many parts of yourself have you silenced? Now imagine making those same decisions from a place of self-trust and inner peace. This is possible for you. Not just possible, it's your birthright. You were born complete, whole, worthy of love and connection. Somewhere along the way, you might have forgotten this truth, but it hasn't forgotten you. It's still there, waiting to be reclaimed. The journey of embracing solitude is really a journey of remembering who you are beneath all the roles you play, all the masks you wear, all the expectations you try to meet. It's about returning to your essential nature, the part of you that knows you're already complete. When you truly understand this, being alone transforms from a problem to be solved into an opportunity to be embraced. Each moment of solitude becomes a chance to deepen your self-knowledge, to strengthen your inner resources, to expand. This understanding changes everything. How you approach relationships, how you make decisions, how you move through the world. You start to recognize that you're not meant to be alone because something's wrong with you. You might be meant to spend time alone because something's deeply right about taking this journey of self-discovery. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the more genuine connections you tend to attract. Not because you're trying to attract them, but because you're no longer repelling them with the energy of need. You become like a lighthouse, steady in your own presence, offering light without demanding anything in return. As we draw our time together to a close, I want to speak directly to those of you who came here today carrying that deep, unspoken question in your heart. I meant to be alone. Perhaps you've been struggling with this question for years. Perhaps recent events have brought it to the surface. Perhaps you're at a crossroads, trying to decide whether to stay in a relationship or venture into the unknown territory of being on your own. What I want you to understand, what I need you to understand, is that this question itself is an invitation to explore the deepest truths of your being, an invitation to challenge everything you've been taught about relationships, about happiness, about what makes a life meaningful. The answer to whether you're meant to be alone isn't a simple yes or no. It's not about destiny or fate. It's about choice. It's about understanding that every moment of solitude is an opportunity to deepen your relationship with the most important person in your life, yourself. Some of you might be thinking, but I've tried being alone. I've tried embracing solitude. And it still hurts. I hear you. I understand that pain. But consider this, perhaps the pain isn't coming from being alone. Perhaps it's coming from the resistance to being alone, from the belief that being alone means something. What if you could release that belief? What if you could let go of the idea that your life is somehow incomplete without a romantic partner? What if you could embrace the possibility that your path might look different from what society expects? And that's perfectly okay. The truth is, some of the most fulfilled people I've ever met are those who have made peace with solitude. Not because they've given up on love or connection, but because they've discovered something profound. The capacity to be alone with yourself, to find joy in your own company, to navigate life from a place of inner wholeness. This is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. Think about the most important moments in your life, the moments that shaped who you are. Many of them probably happened when you were alone. The quiet epiphanies, the brave decisions, the deep realizations. These often come in moments of solitude when we're finally still enough to hear our own wisdom. This is what I mean when I talk about the sacred nature of being alone. It's not about isolation or disconnection. It's about creating space for your own growth, your own understanding, your own truth to emerge. It's about developing such a strong connection with yourself that you can then connect authentically with others, whether that's through friendship, family, community, or romance. The world needs people who are comfortable in their solitude. It needs people who have done the inner work, who have faced their fears, who have learned to listen to their own hearts. Because these are the people who can show up fully in relationships. These are the people who can love without neediness, give without depleting themselves, connect without losing it. It's something powerful to consider, right? Your comfort with being alone might be one of the greatest gifts you can offer the world. In a society that's increasingly fractured, increasingly disconnected from authentic human experience, your ability to be present with yourself, to find peace in solitude, becomes a beacon for others. You might be the one who shows someone else that it's possible to live a rich, meaningful life regardless of relationship status. You might be the one who demonstrates that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. You might be the one who proves that true fulfillment comes from within, not from external circumstances or relationships. This is your invitation to revolutionize your relationship with solitude, to stop seeing it as something to endure and start seeing it as something to embrace, to recognize that every moment you spend alone is an opportunity to strengthen your relationship with yourself, to deepen your understanding of who you are and what you truly want from life. The question isn't whether you're meant to be alone. The question is, can you be alone with yourself in a way that feels like coming home? Can you develop such a rich, fulfilling relationship with yourself that being alone becomes a choice rather than a circumstance? You take nothing else from our time together today. Take this. You are complete. You are whole. You are enough exactly as you are. Whether you spend your life in partnership or in solitude, whether your path includes romance or not, your worth is not determined by your relationship status. Your journey is unique. Your path is your own. And if that path includes periods of solitude, or even a lifetime of walking your own way, know that this isn't a punishment or a problem to be solved. It's an opportunity to discover the depths of your own being, to develop a relationship with yourself that becomes the foundation for everything else in your life. Remember the truth we started with. The quality of your life isn't determined by whether you're in a relationship or not. It's determined by the relationship you have with yourself. This is the relationship that will sustain you through every storm, celebrate with you in every triumph, and walk with you through every moment of your life. So I invite you to embrace this journey, to welcome solitude as a teacher, a friend, a guide on your path to self-discovery, to recognize that being alone isn't a waiting room for real life to begin. It is real life happening right now, offering you countless opportunities for growth, joy, and deep fulfillment. And as you leave here today, carry this knowledge in your heart, but you are not alone in being alone. You are part of a grand tradition of individuals who have chosen or been chosen by a path of self-discovery. Your solitude is not a punishment. It's a privilege. Your ability to be alone is not a weakness. It's a strength. The world needs your authentic self, the self that emerges when you're truly at peace with being alone. It needs your wisdom, your creativity, your unique perspective that can only develop in the fertile soil of solitude. So embrace this journey, trust this path, and know that wherever it leads, you have everything you need within you to walk it with grace, courage, and joy. The answer to whether you're meant to be alone, perhaps is not about being meant to be anything. Perhaps it's about choosing to be at peace with wherever life takes you, choosing to find joy in your own company, choosing to trust that your path, whatever it looks like, is exactly right for you. And in that choice lies true freedom, the freedom to be yourself, to live authentically, to love deeply, whether that love is directed toward a partner, your community, your work, or simply back toward yourself. This is the gift of solitude. This is the power of choosing yourself. This is the beauty of being alone.